A couple of weeks ago, I went to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the ninth film from my favorite director, Quentin Tarantino. I am a Tarantino nutcase. I own and have watched every single one of his films many times over. I even own these two action figures from my favorite one, Pulp Fiction. I've seen every single behind the scenes, and I've even read the scripts to most of his films. If you follow me on the social tab here on YouTube, then you might remember this video was supposed to be originally titled The Poetic Dialogue of Quentin Tarantino. Oh, and also it was supposed to release like a month ago, maybe? I'm so sorry, everyone. I have to keep the lights on here, so, If you did not see that post, do not worry. It just means that you have to click that notification bell and you'll be told every time I upload a new post or video. While you do that, please also make sure to leave a like if you enjoy these video essays. It would really help my small channel get noticed. Now, this video was supposed to talk about some various techniques that Tarantino employs to write such compelling dialogue, but I'll keep that in the vault for the time being, because after watching his latest release for the first time in my fandom of this director, I felt conflicted and didn't quite know what to think. So I gave myself some time and completely rewrote this essay. So let's talk about If you don't know who Quentin Tarantino is, then make sure to get the hell on with it and go watch one, if not all, his films before continuing with this video. I would recommend you start where it all began in 1992 with Reservoir Dogs, but you could also begin with Pulp Fiction, or really anything you want. He's made 9 films to date, and even one like Jackie Brown, which is not my favorite, is miles above anything else most filmmakers would like to achieve in both story and execution. This is the kind of guy no one can argue has a distinct style. And now, he came out with his latest, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Wait, you are telling me that this director made a movie surrounding the Manson family murders and Sharon Tate taking place in 1969? Sign me up. I freaking love it. And that's not even mentioning that the cast is led by Miss Harley Quinn, that guy who is the king of the world, and that other guy who's always eating in movies. Now, that all sounds great, but it's so interesting to look at a director like Tarantino at this stage in his career. The guy has very publicly and repetitively stated that he will not go further in his filmography than 10 movies.
I'm probably only going to make 10 movies, so I'm already planning on what I'm going to do
You
after
said
that.
this, so you're gonna. Are you seriously only gonna do
That's why
10?
I'm counting them. That's why the
got
8th film
2
by
more
Quentin
left.
Tarantino. Yeah, 2 more left. Yeah.
Why?
I want to write novels, and I want to write theater, and I want to direct, and I want to direct theater. Well, that's how I feel about
Same
it.
thing.
You're only going to make 10 movies in your career. This is number 8. Are you really only going to make 2 more movies after this one?
I actually think a lot of directors, I don't think it's that much of a tragedy. It'll probably take me 8 years to do that, all right? So we'll see how everyone feels 8 years from now. But if I only think that I only have 2 movies, well, that keeps it at the tip of the spear, if you know what I mean. That means that those ones better be good, and I better mean everything about them.
To think that a filmmaker of such impact to my life is so frighteningly close to his last hurrah is something for me to feel conflicted about by itself. So let me give you my honest opinion on the movie by first talking about the positives, like the subject and the era. Now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a film full of reverence. Reverence for the golden age of Hollywood when actors were genre heroes and filmmakers were absolute legends. But the way that Tarantino comments on this time is by going to the tail end of it and showing you just how sad and aware everyone was that it was coming to an end.
It's official, old buddy. Well, it has been.
What are you talking about? What did that guy tell you?
Told me the goddamn truth is what he told me.
It's a little pessimistic, but overall a very honest, realistic, and mostly funny interpretation of the film industry, even to this day. What this movie manages to do incredibly well is to completely transport the audience to the year when it takes place. 1969, baby. The set and costume design seems so spot on that even if I was born in 1994 and have no idea what the 70s actually looked like, it just feels real and genuine. It had this very real sense of a city that's flourishing but still lived in. The costumes didn't even look like costumes. They seemed to be very accurate representations of the times and of each character. Which leads me perfectly onto my next positive. That's right, the brilliant characters. I have to say this film really shines through its performances. From DiCaprio to Pitt to Margot Robbie to Pacino, every single one of the actors give a very interesting performance, and they all seem to make a good fit with their character. Margot Robbie plays the very lovely, innocent, and rising star of the era Sharon Tate with such care and playfulness that it truly feels cathartic once the Manson's family members are brutally assassinated by that bad-ass dog. Actually, now that I think about it, it's been one hell of a year for dog food. Wait, I wonder if I can teach that to my doggy.
Stay. Attack!
DiCaprio gets lost in the role of the alcoholic has-been Western star Jake Cahill, the breakdown scene in his trailer and his acting against that brilliant 8-year-old actress both being my personal highlights of the film. But Brad Pitt takes the cake as my single favorite character in the whole movie. As the almost out-of-business stunt double and life assistant to Cahill, he's able to be funny, menacing, endearing, and sad throughout the whole 2-hour and 40-minute runtime. Which brings me to... According to most filmmakers, or at least the ones I've talked with, a film is written and rewritten in 3 separate stages. While working on the script, the screenwriter brings the story and characters to life on the page and gives basically a blueprint for the entire project ahead. Then, during production, the filmmaker might change lines or rearrange scenes or even cut scenes completely, changing the nature of said blueprint. And finally, in editing, the editor will reshape the movie once again by cutting, omitting, adding lines, music, and sometimes completely changing the meaning of what was shot, let alone written. Since it's a ton of rewrites before you get to the final script, a whole bunch of changes during production, and again several versions of the film's final edit, in the end, what you get is actually about 327 passes of the story. Well, not really, but you get the point. So the fact that any movie could be even similar to what was on the page to begin with is impressive to say the least. Even a filmmaker as talented and as legendary as Tarantino doesn't get to completely translate his script to the screen. Mostly because, as most writer-directors know, it is through the collaborative medium of production that a film transforms time and time again till it becomes a whole new breathing and living organism. That is, of course, considering that you have talented collaborators who are allowed and incentivized to bring their voice to the table. Tarantino has always been surrounded by a very tight-knit group of individuals since he began his career in 1992. His producer and best friend, Lawrence Bender, this pig of a sexual assaulter who thankfully only owned the production company that distributed his movies, and probably his most important collaborator. His award-winning trusted editor and professional confrontationalist, Sally Menke. It is incredibly impressive to see that every single time they work together, she has been nominated for awards. She's literally never been nominated for any other movie she's worked on, which proves just how much of a great pair these two are.
When I was doing my first movie, the only thing I knew is I wanted a female editor, because I just felt a female editor would be more nurturing to the movie and to me. I wouldn't try to be winning their way just to win their way, all right? They wouldn't be trying to shove their agenda or win their battles with me. They would be nurturing me through this process.
In the beginning, he really doesn't guide me. And then I put together what I think he wants. And pretty much we've worked together so long I can judge what he would want.
The editor-director relationship is one of the most crucial ones, and thanks to Sally and Quentin meeting on his first feature, they were able to create a shorthand and report that most filmmakers could only dream of having with the person tasked to reinterpret their baby.
Initially, I had it like really long. It was like a date in real time, all right? And it was sort of like Sally's job to kind of like, you know, little by little convince me to bring it down and bring it down and bring it down, and it still could be funny. You would still have what I'm talking about, but maybe it wouldn't be so painful.
We do that for 8 months so intense. I see him more than my husband.
And sometimes I, get annoyed with her for not reading my mind 100%. I mean, all right, it's not good enough that she reads it 80% of the time, all right?
We work very intensely together, and it's kind of amazing that we still like each other. If I was with my husband that long, I don't think I'd like him that much. So
While his lifelong producer has not been directly involved with his film since Inglourious Basterds, his distributor made sure to rape half of Hollywood, and that will be important in a couple of minutes, but it is Sally Menke who left Quentin in just about the saddest way possible. Sally Menke passed away of heat exhaustion while hiking with her dog at Griffith Park in Los Angeles at the early age of 56 on September 28, 2010. It took the authorities hours to locate her, and once they did, her dog was sitting right next to her, waiting for her to wake up. It must have devastated not just her family and friends, but certainly her collaborators and her audience. I remember reading about it and feeling a real sense of sadness and loss. Nothing compared to what those closest to her must have felt, but I sympathize with losing a true titan in the industry. Someone who had been inspiring me for years and years with her magnificent work, and someone who would clearly be missed by everyone who grew up watching her movies. And oh boy, did I still underestimate her contributions to Quentin's films. Sally's final collaboration with Quentin was Inglourious Basterds, just the year before. When a person so integral to the voice of a filmmaker is gone, the films tend to suffer from that. And Tarantino's films, unfortunately, have been no exception, in my opinion. His first project after Sally passed away was Django, and to be honest with you, is great, and keeps a very similar feel to Sally's work. Being appointed with the impossible task of replacing his warrior of an editor, Tarantino partnered with Fred Raskin, the editor of some Fast and Furious films. Oh, and freaking Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah! If you've seen Quentin's films many times over, you might be able to notice that in Django, it's clearly not the same person behind the edit bay, which is a fancy Hollywood term for the room where the computer is. There are little details and discrepancies here and there, but thankfully, it's Tarantino's voice that shines through the film and makes it fit into the grander picture of his filmography. I cannot know for sure, but I can only relate his experience of losing her to my own experiences of loss. I imagine Quentin had the task of stepping into the editing bay with this new editor and had Sally in mind for most of the work, deciding to honor her spirit and teachings throughout the years. After all, the written version of the film rarely translates properly into the screen. Whatever it was, Django remained as 85% of what Tarantino had achieved before. Again, this is my opinion. But then came The Hateful Eight, a film that, unlike any other of his films before, felt long. I say felt because objectively it's only 3 minutes longer than Django, but to me, it felt like at least 30 minutes longer. But how? The answer is simple. Pacing. When I say pacing, I'm referring to the rhythm with which a film unfolds on screen. Films tend to have a very specific way of unfolding, and I believe if you were to think of a Tarantino film's pacing, your instinct would be to think of something like this. And you'd be right. But when I think of The Hateful Eight, even considering that I enjoyed the film, I can't help but think of... But wait, who is responsible for this famous term, pacing? Well, that's the editor's job. But hey, if it's the Tarantino film and he wrote it, then he's responsible for the rhythm, you South American ignorant. Okay, first of all, rude. And second, remember when I said the written version of the film rarely translates properly into the screen? See, the pacing of a film is incredibly different from the pacing of a novel or book. And make no mistake, Tarantino's scripts are truly closer to novels than they are to a blueprint for a movie. He even goes as far as to write pages and pages of scenes he knows he'll never even shoot. In order to narrow down a massive script like that into less than 3 hours, Quentin Tarantino needs a truly talented and fearless editor. Someone who, much like Sally, can tell him to F off when needed for the good of the film experience, not for being faithful to the script he spent years writing. Okay, let's look at the perfect storm that unfolded a little bit later. So what happens when your distributor sexually assaults more than a dozen women and the allegations finally come out in October 2017? Well, the rapist gets his company and himself immediately terminated, he goes to jail, and everyone who used to work with him has to find a new and hopefully rape-free home. That leaves Tarantino standing in the middle of a literal bidding war between studios. Everyone wants to make money by distributing his new movies, right? But no one is more desperate than Sony. That's right. The guys whose projections in 2014 stated that they'd be broke by 2 years later, and who are still struggling to make a buck. They outbid any other studio by offering Tarantino anything he wanted. I'm not joking. They offered him a $95 million budget, extraordinary creative freedom, final cut decisions, which means that he could literally do whatever he wanted with the film, and they even agreed to suck his stamps and stick them to the envelopes full of money that they'll have to send him forever now. So I think you know where I'm going with this. The storm passes, the movie gets made, and it gets released some weeks ago. All of those things the studio gave him translated into exactly the same panorama of the Star Wars prequels. Tarantino got so much creative freedom, and since he's already such a legend, I believe no one dared to question or challenge him on anything.
How hard are you on yourself?
I am not forgiving at all because I know that this is what I'm going to be presenting to Quentin Tarantino the first time he's going to watch it.
Okay.
So you can't afford to slack off
Sure.
when you're working with a filmmaker of that caliber.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood completely suffered for it. The movie is shorter than both Django and The Hateful Eight, and it still feels like it's a 4-hour mess of a film where close to nothing happens. Especially if you're a part of the 80% of the audience who has no idea of who the hell either Charles Manson, Sharon Tate, or the Manson family murders are. The saddest thing is that all of the good and amazing elements of his films are all there, but they cannot shine through the god-awful editing in this movie. I could just picture poor Fred Raskin just nodding yes and robotically performing the task he was told to do. After all,
You can't afford to slack off
Sure.
when you're working with a filmmaker of that caliber.
what? Are you going to tell him that the scene sucks? That he should cut it completely? That you have to give most of the audience some context of the murders for the movie to have some sort of weight for the first 2 acts, if you can even call them that? Look, I would be mad, but I'm not. I'm really not. I'm just sad. See, for the first time ever, I felt uninterested, really confused, and sometimes just desperate to grab onto a story thread to follow in a Quentin Tarantino film. The first act suffers heavily from someone not being able to explain to him that cutting away constantly to these funny vignettes of Leo's acting career just takes away any momentum the movie struggled to create until then. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, most people have no idea of where the hell all of this is going. I knew all about the murders. I saw the documentary. And even I was impossibly bored during most of the film because there is no ticking clock that's clearly present. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has such an interesting time bomb. But since 80% of the audience does not know the story, and since the film doesn't care to set it up for you in the beginning, it just becomes a meandering mess. It is so sad to have the feeling that my favorite director fell victim to his biggest fear.
I do like the idea of 10 and done. I do like the idea of not passing over into another period of my career per se due to age and longevity and length.
I will definitely watch his 10th film, hoping all the way that he can recapture his magic. But even if his best era is gone, we still have those amazing movies he made. And if there is one thing I want you to take out of this essay, is the acknowledgement that Sally Menke's voice might be just as strong and as crucial to Tarantino's filmography as his directing. Even if Quentin's films are never again able to get back in the groove, so to speak, I at least have a completely newfound respect for Sally Menke and the importance of a great editor. Roll credits, mother lover.